My name is Stanislaw Robert Liberto with AV Ultra, and in this lesson, we're going to be talking about creating a handwrite effect in Apple Motion for your titles or logos. What you're looking at right now is a little project I put together for a buddy of mine named George, who runs Seed Creative. In talking with him, I thought, hey, you know what? This would be really cool to put together as a tutorial. And he said, go for it, dude. So I thought, hey, let's go ahead and put this together. In my example on AV Ultra Motion Lesson 27 End, you can see we have something very similar. I have just some text being revealed, and I have some calligraphy little scrolls being built on, and I have some text, and then this title design down here. If you take a look at my project, you can see this is built up of several different things. We have a layer just for our background, which I made into a drop zone. If I wanted to, I can replace this out pretty quickly. I have a separate group just for my camera, and in my camera, I have a series of different behaviors. I have my flourishes, clone layers, which are just clones of my side flourish. I have my elegant text that has a mask on it. I have my title design that has a behavior on it. And then I have some reveal groups, which you can see are just white mats that I use to reveal this project. So let's go ahead and get started. If you open up AV Ultra Motion Lesson 27 Start, you're going to see that we have our elegant text, and I have these flourishes. This can be used for logos or any kind of text, but there are some caveats that go along with this. The first caveat is, as of right now, there's no way to write on or auto trace some of this stuff that we're going to be doing. We're actually going to be hand tracing out some of these items, and we're going to talk about why that is a little bit later. The second part is there's no good way to publish this as a template and be able to change things out unless it's just a basic text layer like we have at the very bottom where it shows up as title design. Something like that we can go ahead and publish out, but if we wanted it to animate on and handwrite it, that's not something that we're going to be able to do automatically. So let's go ahead and get started with building out this lesson. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn off all of these different groups for right now. And the reason is I'm going to go through the example and then we're going to talk about how that's built out so you can see how it's built, and then we can keep going with the lesson. I'm going to just grab my text tool and I'm going to just write out fancy. And for my fancy, I've opened up my text, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change that to something pretty dark. And we're going to make this quite a bit bigger. I'm going to center this. We're going to make this pretty big, and I'm going to change this from Edwardian to English. For your purposes, if you don't have English, you can really use any font whatsoever. I'm choosing to use a little bit of cursive for right now, but you can use the same technique to reveal anything that you'd like, whether it be a logo or a font. The next thing I'm going to do is I can see that there's a lot of space in between my letters. And what I want to do is I just want to connect them a little bit, and that's a personal choice for me. So I'm just going to take my tracking and just pull that a little bit closer, something like a minus 6.55%. I'm going to grab that fancy, and we're going to put him in his own group. We're going to close the main group. Now that I have my fancy, we're going to call this title. And I'm just going to center him up the way that I'd like. If you go to your library and you go to your behaviors, you're going to notice that you have a write on behavior. I should be able to just grab this write on behavior and drag it onto my. You'll notice that that's not working at all. And the reason for that is this write-on behavior will only draw or erase the outline of a shape over time. Technically, these aren't shapes. Shapes are referred to as vector objects. So if I grab my pen tool and I make a circle around here, and I go to my inspector and turn off the fill and turn on the outline, now what I can do is I can grab my write on that Bezier. As I play through my timeline, you'll see that it will draw on. So what can we do to use this kind of write-on behavior along with our text? I'm going to zoom in on my canvas here, and I'm going to create a new group. And this new group is going to be called the text reveal. In my text reveal, I'm going to grab my pen tool, and I'm just going to trace out this F in fancy. So I'm using my two tangents here, get something pretty close. And to hold on to one tangent, I'm holding on to Alt Option, and I'm dragging on just one, so that lets me control just one of these. And I'm not being 100% perfect with this because way that we're going to animate this over time, it doesn't necessarily matter for getting things absolutely perfect. And now that I have that, I'm going to click off of it, and that's going to create a shape. I'm going to go into my inspector. I'm going to turn off that fill, and I'm just going to keep that outline. And what I want to make sure of is that I'm covering most of that line as much as possible. So you can see that it's not really covering it too much right here. So I'm going to go to my width. I'm going to bump that up just a little bit. And now we're going to do the same thing for the rest of this F. So I'm just going to call this Bezier F1. I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of this F. I'm going to click and drag just to get some tangents. And again, I'm just getting it fairly close to what I want so that way I can continue to work with my tangents. And you'll notice that even I'm holding on to one, it's still moving both of them. And what I can do is I can right click on my tangent and I can break the handles. What that will do is it lets me move each one individually. Click off so it makes a shape, and I'm going to rename him F2, and we're going to turn off his fill and leave his outline. And I'm going to turn him off right now just because he's in the way. Let's continue to make the rest of this F. So I'm dragging this out. I've got a circle here, so I'm going to make this tangent come up and then all the way down. So now I have my F1, my F2, and my F3. I can see that it's not 100% covering everything, and that's okay for right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this title fancy, and we're going to right click it, and we're going to add an image mask. And now that I have this image mask, I'm going to go ahead and put this text reveal right in there. We'll change that F3, we'll turn off that fill, and you'll notice what happens when I turn off these fills. We have just the stroke, it changes it into a brush stroke. Whereas if we have a fill, it treats it like a shape layer. And now if I go to my library, I'm going to go to my write on behavior, and I'm going to drag this onto my F1. And you'll notice what happens in my timeline is it fills the entire timeline. That's not what I want. And if I just shrink that down and I play this back, well, now we can see that this is revealing over time. So I'm going to do that with the rest of my items really quick. I've animated my brush strokes coming on, and now I can finesse this just a little bit more. If you remember when I have my image mask off, if I turn this on and off, you can see that parts of it seem like they're cut off a little bit. And the reason for that is my text reveal isn't covering everything completely. Well, how can I mitigate something like that? If I go to my individual shaped strokes that we've created before, and I go into my inspector, the reason why we had to change this into an outline is because we wanted it to just follow that path. But we also want to be able to animate and work with this stroke. By default, if it is a solid outline, you cannot access this stroke, only the geometry. So I want to be able to adjust this stroke over time. If I change my outline from solid to airbrush, suddenly my stroke lights up. And if we take a look at this, it softens out just a little bit. So it looks a little bit more like an airbrush, and that's fine for what we're doing right now. I'm going to go to my stroke, and under my stroke, we have a width over stroke. And if I twirl this down, you can see we have this almost this mini keyframed timeline across here. And what this means is the scale from the very beginning of our stroke to the end is going to change over time. Right now it's just flat, so it's not going to change. If I drag this down to say 0, you can see it's very, very thick, and then it gets very thin. Same is true if I go in the other direction. If I bump this up, it's thinner here and then goes around there. It's a little hard to see, so let me go ahead and turn off the main group so we can see that a little bit clearer. And I'm also going to turn on my alpha overlay so I can see what's solid and not solid. So now we've got a pretty good cover across. I'm going to do the same thing with my F2. We're going to change it from outline to airbrush. We're going to change this width over stroke. And I'm clicking there to make a new keyframe. I'm just going to double click in here. And we want it a little bit thicker right in through this area, right in through here, and then again at the very end. Something to be aware of, because we're revealing this whole word, we want some of our strokes to be a little bit thinner than others. So for example, when we're coming around this A or some of these characters that have very thin lines, we want to make sure that we can thin out some of that mask. Otherwise, we're going to get bleed through over here. So as it reveals, it's going to be really chunky, and that's not what we want. I'm going to go ahead and close this up so we can just take a look at this reveal. So that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Now that we have those concepts, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this text reveal and this title, and we have our main group. And in my main group, I've got my title design with my elegant and my side flourishes. If I open up elegant, you can see I've already got a mask layer in there, and that is in my reveal group. If you open up my word, you can see that I've actually traced out each individual letter, and inside each individual letter, I've got that write on behavior. I just have it turned off. If I turn on this write on behavior, turn that on for all of them, and you can see as I'm playing this back, they're all animating in at the same time. And that's not necessarily what I want. For example, my E is going to start right away, but my L won't start till, let's say, that E is complete. So if I just turn off all of these layers and we just have our E, and I want to say it's going to take about 15 frames to draw out that E, I'm going to go into that write on behavior in that E stroke I've already traced out and hit the letter O. And what that means is it's going to write on from there to there. And right around this time, that's where the L is going to start. So I'm going to click on this write on behavior and hit I. And we'll go a little bit further with that and hit O. And you can see I'm just kind of stacking these out one right after the other. So let's take a look at how that builds on. You can see that my E starts just a little too soon, so I'm going to give that a frame back. The next thing I want to do is I want to animate these flourishes to reveal over time as well. So I'm going to turn off this elegant, just focusing on this. There's actually quite a lot of these on my screen. If you take a look right now, animating all of these with that write on behavior is going to get a little tedious. So it'd be great if I can just cut some of that work in half. Really what we're looking at is 2 clone layers of an original that I have here, and that is my side flourishes. My side flourishes are just built with this flourish grass and this trays dot. Both of these, by the way, are included in your library and content. So if you are looking for some of this stuff, you can actually find that in here. I just grabbed some of these and plopped them in here so we can do this lesson together. So everyone should be able to access the same material. You'll notice that my flourish grass has an image mask, and same with these tray dots. In there, I can see in my reveal group. So if I want to animate this with that same write on behavior, I'm going to follow that same concept. I'm not going to do the whole thing, just going to do one of these, and then you can see. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my reveal group, and we're going to make a new shape, and I'm just going to draw this one out here. Something like that. And I'm going to call this flourish 1. And then the next thing I'm going to do just for our purposes is I'm just going to make a big old box. We're going to call this remainder reveal. And I'm just going to turn on that reveal group and turn off that word for right now. In my flourish 1, that is again made a fill by default. I just want it outlined and airbrushed. And we're going to go to that stroke, change that width over stroke, have it very, very large at first. And we're going to use a write on behavior one more time on that flourish 1, and we're going to adjust the timing of it here to about here. So first that's going to build on, and then we're going to take this rectangle, just going to scoot it back to about here, and I'm going to make a keyframe for the properties. I'm going to go to the scale, and I'm going to put a keyframe on the X and the Y. And we'll go to about 3 seconds, and we're going to scale that up really, really big, the X and the Y. I'm going to turn that layer off, and I'm just going to group these two in its own group and call it flourish reveal. So if I take this side flourish, I'm going to add an image mask, and we're going to use the image mask of that flourish reveal. So over time, first we have that stroke, and then we should have that rectangle come out and reveal all the rest of it. So if I turn on that rectangle again real quick, we should be able to see it expand over time. I'm just going to turn that off so we don't necessarily see it. And now that I have this side flourish, I'm going to actually just hit the letter K and make a clone of him. We're going to turn off the original side flourish. I'm going to click on side flourish again and hit K one more time. So now we have 2 clones. And what I'm going to do with clone 2 and clone 3 is I'm going to take clone 3 and we're going to change the Y rotation to 180. So basically now we have the opposite. And if I drag this over to this side, turn on my elegant text so we can kind of lay things out a little bit better, and I play this back, I can line this up however I want, center that out, Now that we have all that animating on, let's go ahead and animate this title design. And what we're going to do with this is a simple text sequence behavior, and we're just going to have this rotate in. I'm going to drag that rotate in. We're going to go in the inspector, open up the controls, and we're going to change the spread to 1. We're going to change the animate to words. And let's just make sure that this isn't going to take too long. Take that rotate in, and we'll trim it down to about 4 seconds. So now as that kind of plays in, we should have the word title, rotate in, and then design. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a camera to create that nice movement that we saw in our example. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this to draft quality and quarter quality for right now. We are going to be working with a bit of depth of field. The next thing we're going to do is add a camera, and right away we're going to put him in his own group. And you'll notice if I move my camera around right now, it's not doing anything because my layers are still in 2D. Now something really interesting is going to happen here. If I change my main group to a 3D layer, check out what happened to my clone layer. It totally disappeared. So how do we get around that? I'm going to change this back into a 2D layer. And if I regroup this and I make this into a 3D layer, now my camera will work and I'll still have my clone layers. So effectively what we're doing is we're flattening out all those different items in the main group into its own two-dimensional composition. That's just a nice, easy way. If you have things that are working kind of funny, try just grouping it and then working with a little bit more. Do the way that the layers stack and consolidate down. That's really going to help you out. The next thing we're going to do is add a behavior, and this one we're going to add a framing behavior. And I don't want my framing behavior to take up the whole time, so we're going to go to the 1 second mark and hit I, and go to the 4 second mark and hit O. And so if I go to the beginning, just want to be able to see where this E is coming in. For our framing, we're going to put group 1 right into that. And you're going to see it's going to zoom out quite a bit. That's because group 1 is very, very large right now. So if I go back to my framing and I go to my framing offset, we're just going to change this Z to about 0. And we're going to change our X to about 50. And if I go before my framing behavior, now I can start working with my camera to line it up a little bit better. I'm going to zoom in on that letter E. And the reason why we put it in its own group is so that way we can rotate it and control it just a little bit more than we could before. So if I scale this group down and I rotate this a little bit more, I'm going to have a little bit more control than I didn't have previously. And go back to my group. And we're using the group and the camera controls to give us a kind of movement that we can't normally get when we just have the camera by itself. So now if I have this start up, you can see that our frame behavior kicks in. And because we scale that, we're going to have to change that framing behavior a little bit. If I play this back, we're going to change how that animates on by changing our path offset. So halfway through, now we have this elegant title design come in. So we're going to just take this at the very beginning and we'll stretch out our framing behavior, maybe a little bit here. So as this kind of draws on, we can follow that. And again, I'm just going to work with that path offset a little bit. We'll change this position and rotation time to about 60%. And we can finesse this any which way that we choose. For me, that's looking pretty good. The only other thing I'm going to change is this transition to an ease both. So it's just a little bit smoother as it comes in. The last thing I'm going to add is a bit of a depth of field. So we're going to go to our behaviors, camera movement, and focus. For our focus, we want to take our main group and drop them in there. And for this, we're going to have to make sure we have our depth of field turned on. So make sure you have your depth of field turned on. And let's go to half res and normal. And we want to focus this just towards the end when things are coming into frame. So I'm just scooting my focus towards the end of that framing behavior. And at the very beginning of my timeline, I'm going to open up my camera and its depth of field. And we're going to change this focus offset and this near focus, cranking up my far focus, my focus offset. So that way, as soon as it starts building out, things start getting into focus. And again, with this framing behavior, we can just fine tune that a little bit more. Instead of orient to current, orient to final. And there we go. So that's a way that you can animate your own handwriting or logos and really reveal whatever you'd like, whether they be flourishes or like little touches to lower thirds. Again, my name is Stanislaw Robert Liberto with AV Ultra. Hopefully you found this useful, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot for watching.